When it comes to writing your essays and performance tests on the bar exam, does the mere thought of it make your knees buckle? If so, stick around for today's tip. We're going to talk about why focusing on your writing is so important if you want to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. I'm Jackson Mumey, the owner and founder of Celebration Bar Review. And for the past 30 years, I've helped thousands of bar takers, people just like you, to make their next bar exam the last bar exam. If you want to know more about how we do that, check out the links on this page after this video. Today we're on tip number 6 about ways to make the next bar exam your last bar exam and how you can improve your bar score. What I'm going to do today is to get to the nitty-gritty and talk about one of the most important skills that you need to be successful, and that's your writing. Most people might tilt their head and wonder about that because there are millions and millions of dollars spent in the bar review industry by what I've described for you already as the big box bar reviews. And those folks are trying to convince you that the test is not really about your writing. Instead, it's more about your multi-state score, or maybe it's more about attending the right class, or being with a company that's been doing bar reviews for years and years and years exactly the same way, or being in a bar review that's never really done bar review, but now suddenly decides that they want to be in that business. And oh my, there are plenty of those. The point is that these companies focus on all the things that aren't terribly important at the cost of not focusing on what really matters, which is how do you get your score high enough to pass? One question to address before we get to why that happens is to ask, why would any bar review want you to focus on something that wouldn't actually help you? And the answer is that it has a lot to do with economics and not very much to do with teaching. It's much more economical for a bar review company to have a teacher stand and deliver a lecture to tell the students to read the outlines and then do practice sample multiple choice questions or to write essays on their own than to work with them on their writing. And the reason is that this is a time-intensive skill. It's instructor-intensive and it's personalized work. As a result, most big box bar reviews simply don't do it. They'll say, get your multi-state score up and that'll be enough to make you successful, or use some model answers, or we might occasionally have a grading program, which is really just a template that we've developed. In fact, it's amazing. If you go online, you'll see these companies actually looking to hire people to do the grading. And one of the companies actually says, you don't even have to have passed the bar to do this grading for us. Really? That's crazy. The reality is that most of the courses stay, as a result, right at the state pass rate average or below it, as we've talked about before. So having said that, to give you a sense of why the big companies might stay away from writing, why would you focus on it? And the answer is obvious and simple. As a smaller course, we know that if we can give you more attention and more direction when it comes to writing, we know that this is the area of the score that can go up most rapidly and most significantly, and it can make the biggest difference between failing and passing. Now, I will tell you that there are a handful of people out there who consistently claim to be writing experts on the bar. Interestingly, very few of them have been doing it for more than a few years, and the couple who've been doing it for more than a decade don't have a particularly great track record of success, but they are good marketers, I'll give them that. The reality is that very few people have credentials in the teaching of writing. There are only a handful of us that have done this work for more than 30 years now, focusing specifically on the bar exam. There's really no magic to good writing and teaching good writing. It's mostly a matter of work, feedback, response to the feedback on the part of the writer, and then the ability to make adaptations. What I've tried to do over the years is to simplify our writing approach so that it's accessible to the most number of students with the least amount of a direct teacher intervention, so that even a student in our basic course can get exactly what they need and see what to do and be able to follow a template that works. But the fact is, most courses don't even give you that. They just tell you to IRAC and go out on your own. What we teach in terms of the way to write is a basic fundamental concept of good writing, ways that you can improve your bar score no matter what state you're in or what subject you're working on. So I want to talk through a few of those basic principles of writing in today's discussion. The first of these is the most obvious. It's literally pay attention to the writing. I talk to lots of students who failed their bar exams who will then tell me, I didn't really write any essays or performance tests when I was practicing for the bar last time. It wasn't emphasized in my course, and so I didn't do any at all. Or maybe I looked at some questions and then I looked at some sample answers, but I still didn't really write any myself. I would tell you that you've really got to do the writing. I don't think that you can go in on test day, write your essay or your performance test for the very first time under time conditions and expect a satisfactory score. In a course like ours, we're going to have you write somewhere between 15 and 25 separate essays and performance tests at a minimum. Could you do more than that? Absolutely. But the point is, most people don't even write 10 essays before they go into the exam, and that's just not enough experience under time conditions to see the improvement that you need in your writing scores. The second thing to talk about with writing is that in order to improve and focus on the writing so that you can improve your score, is that you should not ever rely on what's called a model or a sample answer, and here's the reason why. Most of the answers that are produced that are out there in the wild either come from the bar examiners or they come from some of the big box bar reviews, and they're really horrible answers. They're not representative of what you want to do or need to do, and that's deliberate, at least on the part of the bar examiners. Why? The bar examiners don't want to provide a single style of writing and then say if you do this, you'll get a passing score. And the reason is that they're really trying to protect themselves against litigation. If someone did exactly what the bar examiners said in their model or sample answer and didn't get a passing score, then there are areas of grievance and protest and appeals and so on. So the bar examiners across the country made a calculated decision many years ago in every jurisdiction that if they're going to have to release answers, and they've done that as a result of a consent order, that they'll just call those model answers, which is another word for a sample answer. And then they'll provide multiple answers that show different styles, different approaches, even different law, sometimes even incorrect law, but which got reasonable scores or passing scores. The examiners do that so that you've got some broad range of what's available or possible, and essentially so that the examiners can get applicants off their back. But it's really not designed to teach you how to write. It's actually a very passive form of learning. And so when you're studying that way, you're going to have real difficulty with how to make that all work. I think it's interesting to see what the examiners actually say about all this, and virtually every state has their set of comments, but I was looking at the Texas examiners the other day, and they had a really pithy paragraph talking about it. They were talking about their selected essays and MPT answers, and they said that they've been selected to help demonstrate the general length and quality of responses that earned above average scores on the indicated administration of the exam. However, these are unrevised answers written by actual examinees under time constraints without access to books. As such, they do not always correctly identify or respond to all the problems raised by the question. They might contain some extraneous or incorrect information, you think, and they do not in all respects accurately reflect the law or its application to the facts. These answers are not intended as, quote, model answers and should never be taken by anyone as legal advice. Holy cow. Talk about disclaimers, right? So you see, looking at these model or sample answers isn't going to do much good for you at all. And yet at every exam, I've got people who tell me that basically their study approach was to deconstruct those old answers. To be fair, in our course, we've got model answers. However, our model answers are designed in the writing style that we teach, and they're designed to be teaching tools more useful than the examiner's model answers. But frankly, if all you do is to look at a question and then look at a model answer, you're not actually learning how to write, even if you're looking at our models. It's a less painful way to go through, but it's not very effective. The third thing in terms of how to focus on your writing is to think about who your audience is. One of the biggest problems that I see with writing is that people come to take the bar exam and they try to write for the audience that they've been writing for in their real life outside the bar. So if you're a law student, this means you're probably trying to write essays the way you wrote your law school exams. But I've got a news bulletin for you. This is not law school anymore, and it's not a law school exam. If you write the way your professors told you to write, say, contracts in your first year, you're in big trouble. Because IRAC writing and rule memorization and recitation are not the skill that's being tested here. I've got a lot more to say about that in other places. But I want to just point out that what was a great skill for the law school environment may be a terrible skill for the bar exam. Now, in the same way, if your bar review is telling you to just memorize the rules and recite them, you're still writing to the wrong audience. And when you're writing to the incorrect audience, you're going to get a much lower score than if you're directing your work to the correct audience. Here's another example. If you're a practitioner and you're coming to take an exam, say in Florida or California or New York, very often I see attorneys who write their essays or performance tests in the way that they might write in their law practice, and that's also inappropriate. This is not the kind of writing you do for a client, or that you do for a partner in the law firm, or that you would necessarily do for a judge with an appellate brief or a trial brief. The problem is that you get bar applicants who are just used to writing a certain way, and they forget that even within their jobs, they have different audiences. For example, a client's not the same as a partner or a judge, but instead of thinking about bar examiners as a distinct audience, they write the same way they've been doing. And again, it doesn't work. So you want a course that gives attention and focus for how to write for the particular exam that you're taking and the particular graders and readers that you have. That's something that our course takes particular pride in, but most courses don't even talk about it. And it comes with focusing on the skills that are being tested in that part of the exam. If you're in a jurisdiction that has both performance tests and essay tests, you have to write differently on those two kinds of tasks because they're different kinds of tests. The audience may be the same, but the skill that's being tested is very different, so you have to adapt your writing in that regard. The fourth thing is that in most cases, you're going to want to have feedback. That probably means writing and then getting real feedback and then rewriting and going through that process again. Now, most people don't do this. Most people try to write, they get it over with, it's sort of like a tooth extraction, and they think, oh my God, that's done. I'm so grateful, and then I go on to the next assignment. But in fact, the way that writing really improves is to write something as a first draft and then get feedback on it from an objective, knowledgeable mentor. Not somebody who woke up this morning and said, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to do a side hustle and make a few bucks reading essays. Now, that doesn't really work very well. But if you're actually working with someone that knows what they're doing and they give you feedback about your individual work, then it's important to take that feedback and apply it to that piece of writing. In truth, it's actually much better to work with the same piece of writing until you get the format, the structure, the approach, the audience, the law, all of those things managed properly. And when you do that, you see your work really begin to improve. And the last suggestion I want to make about focusing on your writing is to do it under as close to test conditions as you can while you're practicing. That is to say, if you're in a jurisdiction with 1-hour essay questions, do your answers in an hour. Don't take 2 or 3 or 4 hours. Same is true as if you're in a 30-minute essay or a 45-minute essay jurisdiction. When you build bad habits, they're tough to change at the end. So if you're in a jurisdiction that gives you 30 minutes and says do 2 essays in an hour frame, do it just that way. I think that in all those approaches, if you do it the way that the exam is going to be set up, you're going to get a better result. If you're going to handwrite your exams, which I don't recommend, handwrite in practice. If you're going to type, which we would recommend, type in practice and make sure you use the same ridiculous software that the examiners make you go through. Make sure that you always write with the book closed. It doesn't do any good to have your book open, stop the clock and go research the law so that you can recite it and put it in your essay. That won't happen on exam day, and it's not a good way to practice. So the point I've really tried to make with all 5 of these tips is to focus on your writing, to pay attention to it in such a way that you can see dramatic increases in your scores, much greater increases than you're likely to see in changing your results on the standardized or multiple choice parts of the test. Those tests are designed to be equivalent from exam to exam, so they don't change the results much. But essays and performance tests can jump a huge amount. And that's one of the reasons why we say it's so important to focus on your writing. That's it for today's tip. I'll be back in the next lecture to talk about tip number 7 in our list of 10 ways to make the next bar exam your last bar exam.